Karen sold my house while I was bleeding in the desert, not rented. Sold. Replaced my mailbox with a gray HOA cluster box and put my truck on the impound list. And when I got back, she told me, "You don't live here anymore." Lady, I faced insurgents. You think I'm scared of a woman with a clipboard and a Pomeranian? 6:42 a.m. The air in Maplewood Pines was cool, crisp, and smelled faintly of pine needles and freshly trimmed tyranny. I just pulled into my driveway, boots still dusty from deployment, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd get 5 minutes of peace before unpacking. Instead, I got Karen, standing dead center in my front yard like she owned the soil, arms crossed, lips pursed tight enough to crack walnuts. "You don't belong here," she snapped, her little dog yapping at my tires. "This property's being reclaimed by the HOA due to abandonment." I blinked once. "I was in Syria," I said, voice flat. "You think I had time to respond to your laminated flyers while dodging rockets?" She smirked like she just caught a kid shoplifting. "Well, things changed while you were gone. You didn't show up to hearings. We posted notices. This house is HOA managed now, and the board voted to sell the lot." I looked at my home. My grandfather's porch swing was gone, the flag I'd left in the window replaced by a clipboard with a QR code labeled HOA payment portal. My truck had a bright orange sticker slapped across the windshield, "Unauthorized vehicle." The lawn had been trimmed to HOA standard, too clean, too wrong. I swallowed, jaw tight. "You're trespassing," I said. She laughed. "Actually, you are." Two men stepped out from behind her. Matching polos, fake badges, aviators they probably wore at night. One of them thumbed his plastic holster like it held something more than breath mints. "Sir, you need to vacate," the tall one said, tone smug. "We can escort you off the premises or tow your vehicle." I stared at him, deadpan. "Those badges made by Fisher-Price?" The shorter one frowned. Karen didn't flinch. "You forfeited ownership when you failed to comply. HOA Charter Section 9, Paragraph 6. I took a breath, then slowly reached into my duffel and pulled out a sealed folder. "This is the original deed," I said calmly. "Federal notarization. And unless you're licensed to evict a deployed soldier under the Service Members Civil Relief Act, you're about to have a really bad Tuesday." Karen rolled her eyes. "You military types always think rules don't apply to you." She gestured to the fake cops. "Remove him." I didn't move. "Before you go playing rent-a-judge, maybe look up what it means to illegally occupy a property belonging to a federal officer under active duty protection." That made them pause. The tall one squinted, uncertain. The short one muttered something and stepped back. Karen didn't budge. "The sale's done," she hissed. "New buyers moving in next week. I suggest you start packing." I looked at her, then looked at the house. My house. And something shifted. Not rage, something colder. A quiet, rooted resolve. I pulled out my phone, tapped a single contact. He picked up on the first ring. "You back?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "And it's already started." The line went silent for half a beat. Then, "You want the full team?" I stared at Karen, at her knockoff lawman, at my stolen yard, my erased existence. My voice was steady. "Bring everyone." They showed up faster than the HOA could print another violation notice. By 9 a.m., I was sipping lukewarm coffee from a gas station cup while watching 4 black SUVs roll into the neighborhood like a funeral procession for false authority. Karen was out front again, wearing a tracksuit with HOA Proud bedazzled across the chest and walking her poodle as if she hadn't just tried to evict a soldier from his own home. She paused when she saw the vehicles, eyes narrowing, then straightened like she'd just been promoted. "You're really overreacting," she said without even looking at me. "Bringing your little veteran buddies into a community matter? It's not that deep." I didn't respond. Instead, I stepped aside as the first man got out. No uniform, no words, just a look that could curdle milk. The team moved like wind, silent, deliberate, precise. They weren't soldiers in name anymore, but you could smell discipline in the way they stood, how they scanned the yard, how one of them immediately began measuring the new HOA fencing like he was planning an airstrike. Karen marched up to him, fake confidence radiating from her like overpriced perfume. "Excuse me, you can't just be here measuring things. This is private HOA property." The man didn't answer. He just held up a small scanner, then tapped something on a tablet. "You're trespassing," she barked. "I'm calling real police this time." Another agent stepped in. soft-spoken but firm. We already contacted the sheriff's department. They advised we proceed under federal jurisdiction. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. By the time she followed me back to the porch, her facade was starting to crack. "This is intimidation," she muttered, like saying it out loud would make it true. "I'll have the entire board file a complaint." I turned to her and handed her a new document, sealed, freshly stamped, still warm from the federal office. "Military repossession order," I said, "effective immediately." She blinked at it. "That's not a thing," she scoffed. "I've been president of this HOA for 6 years. I know the law." I raised an eyebrow. "You know the bylaws in a laminated handbook. I know the U.S. Code." Her fingers curled around the paper, knuckles whitening. "You have no idea what you just started," she hissed. "Oh, I do," I said quietly, "and so do you." "Check the coordinates." One of the agents turned his tablet toward her. The satellite image on the screen highlighted the boundaries of my property, only now it was overlaid with a red grid pattern labeled Restricted Military Use Surveillance Authorization Zone. Karen squinted, then laughed high and forced. "That's just a map. It means nothing." The agent didn't laugh. "This area was part of an experimental sensor grid before the HOA was incorporated. The property was never cleared for civilian redevelopment." Her face drained a little. "We had permits." I didn't smile. "Issued by yourselves using a forged quitclaim deed signed during my deployment 2 days after I got medevaced from a blast. You thought I wouldn't trace that?" She backed up a step, as if the document weighed something physical. The air shifted. Neighbors peeked through windows, phones already recording. Somewhere down the block, a garage door rolled up just enough for someone to duck behind a trash bin with a camera. Karen's voice was thinner now. "The sale already went through," she said. "You can't reverse it." I leaned in slightly. "No, but I can void it, especially if the buyer's part of the fraud." Her jaw clenched. "You're bluffing." I stepped aside as another SUV door opened. Out came a woman in a tailored black suit with a badge that glinted in the morning light. Karen's eyes widened. "Who?" she started, but the woman was already flipping open a file. "Miss Reed," she said calmly, "we need to talk about your bank accounts." And just like that, the game shifted, permanently. Karen froze like someone had hit pause on her entire existence. The woman in the black suit didn't wait for permission. She never even looked at Karen, just started reading aloud from a printed statement as casually as if she were reciting a grocery list. "Preliminary findings indicate the unauthorized transfer of $210,750, 0 cents from the HOA discretionary account," she said, flipping a page, "redirected to a private entity registered under your name, the Reed Community Wellness Project. Care to explain what that is?" Karen's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her poodle barked once and then went silent, like even the dog understood it was time to lawyer up. The neighbors weren't just watching now, they were filming from porches, behind bushes, one guy even holding his phone over a hedge like it was the Super Bowl. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say anything anymore. The file was doing the talking. The agent turned another page. "Records show the funds were used for permits, labor, and naming rights of a recreational facility, specifically a tennis court built 3 blocks from here, engraved on the entry plaque, 'The Reed Courts in honor of community excellence.'" That last part hit like a slap. A few neighbors laughed, short, awkward bursts, trying to process what they'd just heard. Karen straightened suddenly, like posture might still save her. "It was for the community," she snapped. "A wellness initiative for the children." The agent didn't blink. "That's interesting because your personal account received monthly transfers labeled consulting fees from the same contractor hired to build the courts. We have the timestamps. We have the audio." Karen turned slightly pale. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I was protecting the neighborhood." "By seizing property from an active duty soldier?" the agent asked, eyes still calm. Karen's gaze flicked to me, as if I'd suddenly grown horns. "He left. He abandoned the house," she cried. "The bylaws are clear. 90 days of non-response equals forfeiture." I stepped forward then, voice low. "And the federal law is clear. The Service Members Civil Relief Act prohibits any civil penalty, foreclosure, eviction, or transfer of title while deployed unless there's a court order." Which, by the way, you never got, but you knew that, didn't you? Karen opened her mouth, but only a dry sound came out. Her face was a cocktail of disbelief, rage, and dawning panic. She looked toward the other SUVs, Finally realizing this wasn't a bluff. This was Judgment Day. The agent signaled one of the men nearby. A third SUV opened and a uniformed officer stepped out. Military police, real this time. "Miss Reed," he said, tone flat as iron, "you're being detained for federal investigation into fraud, impersonation of authority, and illegal seizure of protected property. Please place the dog down and keep your hands where we can see them." A collective gasp rippled through the neighborhood. The kid across the street dropped his bike. Karen didn't move. Her eyes darted, calculating, scrambling for an escape route that didn't exist. She started to argue, to yell, but all that came out was a choked, "You can't do this." I'm the HOA president. The agent didn't even flinch. Not anymore. As they walked her to the vehicle, neighbors slowly trickled closer. A few clapped. One man recorded the whole thing while narrating like it was a nature documentary. And here we see the suburban dictator returning to her natural habitat. Federal custody. Karen's poodle whimpered as it was gently scooped up by animal control. She didn't even look back. But I wasn't done watching. Because if Karen thought the storm ended with her, she was wrong. The buyer of my property was still coming, and he wasn't just any buyer. He was worse. He arrived exactly 48 hours later, like clockwork, because, of course, someone like him would be punctual for the paperwork of a stolen house. A sleek black Tesla pulled into my driveway, the tires whispering across pavement I'd poured with my own hands 6 years ago. Out stepped a man in a tailored gray suit so sharp it looked like it had a legal degree. His hair was combed with precision, his shoes polished like a mirror, and his walk, it said everything: confidence, entitlement, and that special kind of smirk worn only by men who've never had a day of accountability in their lives. He didn't look at the house, didn't even glance at me standing by the porch, just walked straight to the front door like he already lived there. "You must be Sergeant Carter," he said finally, turning halfway with a smile so thin it looked photoshopped onto his face. "I'm Elliot Mason. I believe this property now belongs to me." He held up a manila folder, documents poking out like weapons. "I paid full market value through a legally executed sale facilitated by the HOA. If there's a grievance, take it up with them." I nodded, slowly. "I did. She's in custody." That flicker in his eyes, it was fast, but I saw it. The calculation. The shift. "Well," he replied, lips tight, "that doesn't affect the legality of the transaction. I'm just a buyer." "You're a real estate attorney," I said, voice steady. "You attended the closing meeting. You watched her sign a forged quitclaim deed while I was deployed. You helped authorize a trust account she wasn't legally allowed to control." Elliot's smile didn't fade, it just hardened. "None of that's been proven," he said. "And even if it had, you'd need a court to invalidate the sale." He stepped past me toward the front steps. "I move fast. That's how the market works." I let him take 2 more steps before saying, "You wired the funds to an offshore account, registered under your firm's shell company. You think federal agents don't notice $190.00 K vanishing into a Cayman branch called Pacific Acquisition Holdings?" That stopped him, not turned, not flinched, just stopped. "You can't prove intent," he said, slower now. "It's a gray area at worst." Behind me, another door clicked open. Mallory stepped out, holding a binder thicker than a law textbook. "Then let's get into the shades of gray, shall we?" Mallory walked up beside me, opened the binder, and flipped to the first tab without saying a word. He held it out to Elliot like a game show host revealing a prize. "We have email transcripts, wire confirmations, and even a lovely little voicemail where you refer to the HOA president as our puppet." Elliot's face twitched. "That's inadmissible," he muttered. "Oh, that's irrelevant." I said, stepping forward, "is that this wasn't just fraud. It was an attempt to gain access to a classified defense testing site." His eyes widened a fraction. "That's absurd." "Really?" Mallory raised an eyebrow. "Because under Executive Order 12,968, this land falls under conditional military oversight. You didn't just buy a house, Mr. Mason. You attempted to acquire sensitive federal property during a time of armed deployment. That makes you not just a co-conspirator, but a national security risk." He finally turned fully toward us, his smile gone now, replaced by something that looked a lot like fear dressed in denial. "You don't scare me," he said, voice cracking ever so slightly. "You people and your war games." "No," I said, pulling one last item from my bag, "but this might." I handed him a sealed envelope. Pentagon seal, signature dry, contents not up for negotiation. This land is part of an active surveillance zone tied to our overseas operations. Every square inch is protected, and now your name is flagged on multiple agency watch lists. Sirens echoed in the far distance. Mallory didn't even turn. Hope you brought your overnight bag, counselor. Elliot tried to speak, but by the time he opened his mouth, the only thing coming for him was a set of steel cuffs and a long ride downtown. And still, the HOA wasn't done paying. The cuffs clicked around Elliot Mason's wrists with a finality that echoed louder than the sirens behind him. He didn't protest. Not a word. Just stood there, stiff as his starched collar, blinking at the binder in Mallory's hands like it might suddenly rewrite itself. The agents flanked him on both sides, one reading him his rights while the other retrieved the folder of fake purchase documents he'd clutched so tightly the edges were creased with sweat. As they guided him toward the unmarked SUV, neighbors filmed openly now. Someone muttered, "That's what HOA justice looks like," and a soft wave of applause rippled across the street. A woman in pajama pants raised her coffee mug in salute. Elliot didn't look back. He didn't need to. He'd just joined Karen in the HOA Hall of Shame. But for me, that wasn't the end, not even close, because as satisfying as it was to watch both the snake and the ladder go down, the real rot was still embedded deeper beneath the asphalt, behind the fences, inside the HOA itself. That night, I sat at my dining table, finally mine again, with malaria and my attorney, Nora Boone, a retired JAG officer who handled defense cases sharper than most scalpels. We laid out every document, every violation, every HOA board transaction from the past 3 years. And what we uncovered made Karen's tennis court embezzlement look like pocket lint. There were zoning approvals signed by non-existent city officials, legal threats mailed to elderly residents for minor yard decor, thousands in unexplained administrative fees rerouted to personal PayPal accounts labeled community beautification. It got worse. One file detailed how the HOA fined a refugee family, Syrians ironically, for building a small vegetable garden in their backyard, claimed it violated uniform landscaping standards. They bulldozed the garden while the family was at work. A neighbor said the HOA president called it a visual disturbance. That one hit me harder than I expected. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was seeing that the people this system steamrolled looked a whole lot like the ones I'd seen overseas, trying to start over from nothing. Or maybe it was the fact that they'd bulldozed hope in the name of aesthetics. So we filed it all, every receipt, every signature, every falsified form. With federal backing, the SCRA, and enough evidence to bury a bank, we submitted a motion for full audit, emergency court injunction, and criminal proceedings against the entire HOA board. The judge didn't blink. In under 48 hours, she issued a sweeping freeze on all HOA accounts, suspended the board's authority indefinitely, and assigned me temporary fiduciary control over what remained of the HOA's assets. I hadn't asked for it, didn't want it, but I accepted it for one reason: to burn this broken machine down to the bolts. The very next morning, I walked into the now abandoned HOA office, just a glorified room above the community gym, and opened the rule book to page 1. Then I ripped it in half. I shredded the whole thing, every arbitrary code about mailbox dimensions and grass blade height. I deleted the fine database, canceled every pending violation, and returned the lawn ornaments confiscated over the years, some of which were sitting in labeled boxes like war trophies. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came when I replaced the neighborhood welcome sign. In place of the old faux marble slab that read Maplewood Pines, a proud HOA community, I installed a plain wooden board, hand-painted, bold and honest, "Welcome to Liberty Hollow, Veteran Protected Zone." Underneath, in smaller letters, just one rule: live free, respect others, no Karens allowed. And still, I wasn't done. It was like someone flipped a switch. The moment that new sign went up, Liberty Hollow took its first real breath. Gone were the quiet nods and forced waves of a neighborhood trained into submission. People started stepping out of their houses like survivors blinking into the sun after a storm had passed. Lawns grew a little wilder, flags flew a little freer, and for the first time in years, kids played in the street without someone threatening to fine their parents for noise violation. I watched from my porch, the same one Karen tried to take from me, as a group of teens painted a mural on the old HOA clubhouse wall. It wasn't HOA approved, of course. That was the point. It read, "Freedom grows here." No signatures, no permits. Just paint, heart, and truth. Inside, I continued to comb through the wreckage. The HOA's files, even after Karen tried to delete half of them, were a gold mine of misconduct. There were audio recordings from board meetings where members mocked disabled residents and discussed ways to push out undesirable aesthetics, code for anyone with a porch swing, cultural decorations, or foreign accent. One particularly vile memo laid out a plan to raise HOA dues in phases, subtle enough to avoid suspicion. That memo was signed by 4 current board members, 2 of whom had already listed their homes for sale and gone on vacation indefinitely. Cowards with power always run fast when you turn the lights on. But the real shock came when I opened a sealed file labeled Tier 2 Expulsions. It was a plan, a literal strategy document outlining how to fabricate violations, flood residents with legal-sounding threats, and seize homes through lean manipulation if they didn't comply. There were target lists, highlighted names, elderly folks, new immigrants, military families, people least likely to fight back. They called it passive transition. I called it predatory warfare wrapped in suburban charm. And I was done letting it fester. With Mallory's help, we forwarded everything to the State Attorney General's office and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I requested a full RICO investigation into the HOA's activities, arguing that they operated not as a community management body, but as a racketeering network masked by block parties. And this time we had receipts. Nora Boone worked the legal angles like a surgeon, filing for restitution not just for me, but for every family named in that Tier 2 folder. We compiled sworn affidavits, video clips, bank records, and more than a dozen interviews from neighbors who finally felt safe to speak up. And then I did something Karen never saw coming. I hosted a meeting, not in secret, not behind closed doors, but right out in the open, under a string of mismatched backyard lights hung from mailboxes and garage beams. Everyone was invited. No forms, no RSVP, no fees, just people, chairs, and a potluck table long enough to feed the guilt out of a guilty man. We shared food, stories, rage, and relief. Someone brought a speaker and played Springsteen. Someone else grilled hot dogs on a smoker that had once earned them a $300 0-cent fine for unauthorized backyard cooking appliances. I gave a short speech, nothing rehearsed, just heart. I told them this wasn't about me winning. It was about us getting our homes back. And just like that, Liberty Hollow stopped being a battleground. It became a community again. But then, just when I thought the war was over, I found it, buried deep in a box Karen had tried to shred before her arrest. A small envelope, postmarked over a year ago, unopened, nearly tossed with the trash. Inside, something I never expected, and it hit harder than every legal win combined. The envelope was thin, cheap paper, slightly wrinkled, addressed in pencil to the soldier who used to live here. No return address. No stamp, just a smudge of ink where someone had tried and failed to write urgent. I opened it carefully, half expecting some leftover HOA threat Karen hadn't managed to send, but inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, wide-ruled, with the kind of handwriting only a kid could get away with. The letter began, "Dear Sir, my dad said the HOA is trying to steal your house. That's not fair. You were gone helping people. I think you should get your house back. So I made you this so you don't forget it's yours." Tucked inside was a crayon drawing. A little brown house, a flag in the window, and a stick figure standing tall in front of it, wearing a green uniform and holding what I think was supposed to be a cup of coffee. Above the drawing, in crooked but determined lettering, were 3 words, "Don't let 'em." I don't know how long I stared at it. Long enough for the coffee to go cold in my hand, long enough for the sounds of Liberty Hollow to fade into the background. That letter, quiet, innocent, and fiercely honest, cut deeper than any threat Karen had ever made. It reminded me why I stayed, why I fought, not for land, not even for justice, for the idea that kids like her could grow up in a place where you don't get punished for planting vegetables or hanging a flag. I framed that letter, hung it in the hallway, right where the old HOA compliance guidelines used to be nailed to the wall. Residents started dropping by when they heard about it. Some just nodded, others left pies. One woman brought me a 6-pack and said, "You made it okay to breathe here again." The Syrian family Karen tried to evict came back with their kids and rebuilt the garden, this time with help from half the block. It wasn't uniform. It was an HOA approved. It was a beautiful mess of herbs, flowers, and life. I stood beside it with a trowel, and no one told me I was violating a guideline. That week, I returned every item Karen's board had confiscated: bird baths, flags, wind chimes, garden gnomes. I left them all on residents' porches like holiday gifts from a justice-themed Santa. People laughed, cried, hugged. Someone painted a mural on the clubhouse's outer wall, a giant cartoon of Karen, mid-scream, being dragged into a squad car by bald eagles in tactical vests. The HOA used to fine you for painting anything without pre-approval. Now it was the backdrop for family photos. My favorite was a selfie from a teen wearing a t-shirt that read, "I survived the HOA-pocalypse." Still, I knew we weren't done. Not entirely. The HOA had collapsed, the board resigned or indicted, but the echoes of what they'd done still lingered. There were legal loose ends, appeals, and a few holdout busybodies trying to form an advisory committee, but they didn't stand a chance. Not with the files we'd uncovered, the support we'd built, and the attention the case was now drawing at the state level. Liberty Hollow wasn't just a story anymore. It had become a precedent, a symbol. And whether they liked it or not, everyone in that neighborhood now lived in a place protected not by a rule book, but by a reminder. And that reminder, it hung right there on my wall, crayon on cheap paper, next to my medals and the folded flag from my grandfather's casket. 3 words, scribbled by a kid who didn't know she was writing the anthem for an entire community. Don't let on. Summer came fast to Liberty Hollow. The air smelled like cut grass, charcoal, and something that had been missing here for years: freedom. No one was measuring their bushes anymore. No one was writing anonymous letters about someone's garage door color. People waved for real now, not just out of obligation. Kids biked through the cul-de-sacs like they owned the streets, because finally they sort of did. I sat on my rebuilt porch most evenings with my old dog at my feet, sipping cheap beer and watching a neighborhood remember how to breathe. Across the street, the Syrian family's garden bloomed with chaos. Sunflowers taller than fences, herbs spilling over the edge of planters, kids running through it like it was a jungle gym. That garden used to be considered a visual nuisance. Now it was the beating heart of our block. Mallory stopped by one last time on a Wednesday evening, just before dusk. He handed me a sealed envelope with a nod. "From D.C.," he said. No fanfare, just that typical quiet reverence guys like us understood. Inside was a formal commendation, signed and stamped, recognizing the restoration of constitutional protections and lawful housing rights within a compromised domestic sector. Alongside it, a handwritten note from the judge who'd overseen the case. "This land was always yours. You defended it overseas, and you defended it again here. We don't forget that." I didn't need the medal, but damn if that note didn't land somewhere deep, I'd tuck it beside the drawing in the hallway. No glass frame, just pinned up like the war maps we used in command tents. Truth didn't need polish. It just needed to be seen. The media came knocking, of course. Local news, a couple of national outlets, even a podcast with Suburban Justice in the title. I gave one interview. Told them the story wasn't really about me. It was about every veteran who comes home to find the war never ended. It just moved to their front yard. It was about families who got fined into silence, about power wielded by the unworthy. I said what I meant. No scripts, no edits, just the truth. This wasn't revenge. It was a reset. That quote made it to the local paper's front page, right next to a photo of Karen being led away in cuffs, her dog staring blankly at the camera like even it was ready for a new zip code. Weeks passed. The houses on the block didn't change much, but the people did. Laughter came back, so did lawn flamingos, porch swings, and wind chimes that hadn't sung since the last time freedom rang around here. One neighbor started a street book exchange in a little wooden box nailed to a tree. Karen would have called it unregulated structure placement. Now it had its own waiting list. HOA used to fine people for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. This month, the kids turned the entire cul-de-sac into a hand-drawn map of Liberty Hollow, complete with dragons, secret bases, and one suspiciously well-drawn bald eagle punching a Karen in a power suit. We left it there for weeks. And as for me, I didn't move. Didn't upgrade, didn't cash in. I stayed right where I was. In the house they tried to erase, in the town they tried to own, beside the porch they tried to condemn. Every morning I raise the flag again, not because I have to, but because I get to. Some people think patriotism is loud, but I've found that sometimes it's quiet. It's neighbors helping neighbors rebuild a garden. It's a kid's drawing hung beside a medal. It's a woman planting basil without fearing a violation notice. And it's a single sentence stuck to the community bulletin board in permanent marker, circled 3 times, no Karens allowed, ever. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive in a courtroom or a uniform. Sometimes it shows up as a neighborhood learning to stand again, together, unafraid, uncontrolled, and finally, unburdened. They thought they could rewrite ownership with paperwork and fear, that a fake badge and a laminated rule book could erase sacrifice, silence neighbors, and bury a community under fees and fear, but freedom doesn't vanish that easily. It may go quiet, it may lie low, but when pushed, it fights back with documents, with voices, with unity. This wasn't about one house or one Karen. It was about drawing the line on our porches, in our gardens, and across every no unauthorized flags notice ever taped to a door. We didn't just get rid of an HOA. We reclaimed what it tried to take: dignity, belonging, and the right to live without permission. So if you're watching this thinking, could that happen to me? The answer is yes, unless you stand your ground, because freedom isn't enforced, it's defended. Sometimes with courts, sometimes with cameras, and sometimes with crayons.